Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist worldwide.
Coming up next Tuesday night, we will have our interview with Professor Lawrence Krauss. I've been trying to line that interview up for a while, and it's finally happening on the radio on Tuesday night of next week, December 17th, and it's going to be a great show. And then because of the Christmas holiday coming up, I'm actually going to double up next week. We're not going to do a Christmas week show. So many folks are going to be traveling and distracted, spending time with family and friends. So on Wednesday night of next week, we'll do another podcast. It's 2 shows in 2 days. And the second show is called The Best and Worst of 2013, as we look back at some of the most awesome stuff that science has done and humanitarians have done, and just some of the best headlines and stories and events out there, just the stuff that sort of rang our bell, and the worst. And we're also, yes, going to include the stories of just the religious insanity that is. I was just looking in the headlines this week with all that business at Sarah Palin speaking at Liberty University, talking about how them angry atheists are out there to abort Christ from Christmas. We're going to talk about her. She's a greatest hits of face palms. Just every time I read about it, you see that great big smile on her face, and then you realize that, the lights are on, nobody's really home. Her cheese has slid off its cracker long ago. Right? She's got charisma, but she has no idea what she's talking about. So she's going to definitely be on the list. And if you want to nominate someone or something for the best or worst of 2013, you can send that to podcast at thethinkingatheist.com. The new website design is live. We went live a couple days ago. Huge thanks out to Tom and Laura and the folks at Web Evolved for a great redesign of the website. It was sort of time. It's a little spooky when you've got a successful site, and it was. We won the About.com Reader's Choice Award for Best Atheist Website for 2012. But it had been up a couple of years, and we needed better functionality. So Tom and the crew went in, and they did a redesign, a little bit of a brighter look. They've laid it out a little bit differently. It is now much more smartphone friendly, so it should come up on your smartphone a whole lot easier. The podcast page and the video page, they both load much more quickly. And we're working on a few tweaks to the interface to be able to play the podcast on the podcast tab and just stuff like that. So if you want to check it out, visit the website, thethinkingatheist.com, and check out the new look. Tonight's show is all about your email. We're not doing super heavy topics here in the month of December. It's kind of a chance to breathe a little bit. And so tonight, we're just going to sort of dip into the mailbag, if you'll pardon the cliche, and we're going to see what you have to say. So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, we'll probably take a few phone calls in there as well. And I'll start with a letter from Kat. And Kat said this: I've been thinking about writing into the show for a long time, but after an incident today, I felt I needed some advice. I'm currently a deeply closeted atheist, teaching English at a fairly open, religious military school. I didn't know it was a religious school when I signed up for the job, but the more time I spend in the school, the more Christianity and extreme right-wing politics seem to manifest. Teachers avoid mentioning evolution, Bible verses are written on the board, and non-theists or those of other faiths are teased until they cry or leave. Breaks my heart. I love our military, but this environment is becoming overwhelming. Today I made a mistake and complained against the school on Facebook. I thought I'd file it under private, but one of the faculty saw it and angrily confronted me about my post. There may not be huge consequences for my complaint, but I've certainly angered a lot of faculty. The question is this: is it worth it? What do you do when your entire place of work has completely different views than you do. It's a private school, so I don't think I could file a complaint for abusing religious liberty. I just have to get through it. What would be the right thing to do? Leave and find a more fulfilling job, or stay and try to ignore the crazy? Well, Kat, this is where I put out my disclaimer that I'm no expert. I'm just a guy. And sure, I have a lot of dialogue and correspondence with a lot of people all around the world, and I do have my share of opinions on a great many subjects, and I'll tell you what I think. But, I honestly, in this case, I can't tell you how to proceed. So many of us work in situations where religiosity sort of comes knocking on the door, and we can choose what our pain threshold is there. Now, some say to throw caution to the wind and quit your job and just bolt and figure it out later. I'm not in that crowd. I think you take a more strategic view. Line something up before you leave. Don't make an emotional decision. Don't go in and just get it off your chest and feel better about it at that moment and then pay the price for it for the rest of your life. Is your love for what you do greater than the grief it causes you to watch the God Squad doing what they do left and right, up and down? It sounds to me like you're grieved through and through. If it was me, I probably would be planning an exit. I would probably be trying to find a friendlier territory. I know people who are atheist and they work in the Christian marketplace. They work for Christian retailers, or they work in the Christian music industry. You'd be amazed at the quote unquote, please keep me anonymous emails that I get from people who are on tour with Christian bands all around the country and all around the world. The studio musicians go in and help them record an album because being a musician for a living is what they do, and it's a hugely competitive field, and they got to put food on the table, and yes, they're conflicted about it, and what else do I do? So I'm just going to suck it up, go play the guitar, play the drums, play the keys, get it done. And they've decided the cost benefit on that is worth it. For me, if they're that religious, it's almost like working for a church, isn't it? Like an atheist working in a church, and I know there are some who do it. Must drive them crazy. I don't think I could pull it off. Day after day, service after service. Looking at it's funny how I see church differently now as a non-believer. It's like a completely different experience, and I have to remind myself the eyes through which I used to see this environment, and how much I adored it, and how much I thought it was so good for us and good for me. By the way, I'm finishing the show tonight with a fervent email from a believer, a Christian, who is desperate for me to return to the fold. Sent me this long, emphatic email. I will read you the email, and I will give this young lady my response. That'll be at the end of the show. Kat, only you can decide. Number one, if you are miserable at your job for the rest of your life, you probably answered your own question. And if the benefits outweigh the grief that all this religiosity causes you, well, maybe you should hang around for a little while, but only you can really make that choice. I had an email in from Adrian who said, hey, can you run through the quotes in the intro audio at the beginning of the podcast and tell us who each quote originates from? Thank you very much for that. What drives me crazy is I put the intro to the podcast together 3.5 years ago. And you recognize the voices of the horsemen, right? You hear Dawkins is in there, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. And there's a line that's brash, bold-faced blasphemy. It's a reporter who was reporting on a religious story. And it was like a no-name reporter. I have no idea who this person was. I have no idea who that voice belongs to. It was something that I had heard as part of a larger report on an atheist. Was it a lawsuit? Was it a monument going up? Was it an event somewhere in a religious city? I can't even remember. But I heard this person say brash, bold-faced blasphemy, and I thought, what a great line. And I used it for the show. I have no idea who that is. I failed you, Adrian. Please forgive me. Mike sent a message and said, I was born and raised in England. I've never been religious in any sense. Neither was I really introduced to religious thinking except for the occasional religious classes at school. Not lessons about religions, but genuine religious classes attempting to indoctrinate us into the Anglican Christian religion. Fortunately, this was only during my elementary school years. And this attempt at indoctrination was for the most part a failure to the most of us. I've come across very few religious believers in my life so far, and those few I've met are deistic as opposed to theistic, which brings me to my question, which is about mortality. I've just celebrated my 30th birthday. And a couple nights ago, while laying in bed attempting to sleep, my thoughts drifted onto the idea of my eventual death. It's not something I've given much thought about before, that one day I'm going to die, and that will be the end of everything. The end of me. I've never feared or thought much about it. Until that night, that is. And for some reason, the idea really dawned on me, and I found myself worrying over it. I lost most of that night's sleep to thoughts like how life is so short and how unpredictable and random, and in some cases, sudden death truly is. I tried to think about other things so I could drift off to sleep, but the same thoughts kept coming back. We all assume that our lives will be long and that we'll have gained some sort of achievement by the end of it, but that's not always the case. Tragically, many people die before their time. I've always been a worrier, to be honest, and though this is the first time I found myself worrying about death, and because it's so final and unavoidable, it really got me thinking about things. So my question really is, how do you tackle the idea of your eventual death? Do you worry about it? Do you try not to think about it, or just accept it for what it is and aren't so much concerned? Mike, thank you so much for the message. Well, when I was young, I was like every young person. I was going to live forever. You're immortal. I'm young, I'm skinny, I'm strong, I can stay up 24 hours plus, I can eat pizza at every meal. I'm going to live forever. I mean, the idea of being old seemed like another planet. It seemed like going to traveling to Mars, just not even on my radar. And it was probably around 30, and I guess that's natural, that all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a minute, you start doing the addition. And here I am in my mid-40s, and, given the average lifespan of the American male, I probably have fewer days ahead than I do behind. I don't know. It's possible I might hit 90 plus. No one really knows. But you have those thoughts. Natalie's father just passed away right before the Thanksgiving holiday. He'd had a very long run, a very poor health. He had hospice there in his house. And in the middle of the night, we got the call that he had passed away. And we went over there and we sort of attended as hospice came and prepared him and took him away. And it was, I knew the last time that she would see her father. He didn't want any sort of service or anything, didn't want a viewing. He was going to be cremated and he wanted a simple funeral. And so that was sort of it. We're all sitting there with this man, 67 years old. And we have those thoughts about mortality. I think it's unavoidable. I think you look and you see this is a body that is now lifeless, and one day I will be the same. It's funny, though, I don't fear death as much as I used to when I was religious. And while I don't dwell on it, I mean, it's common. No matter what I do, no matter what I say, no matter what parlor trick I attempt, there's no getting around the fact that one day the music will stop. And there's no getting around the fact that I am essentially, as far as the universe is concerned, insignificant. I have not been endowed with a sort of divine universal purpose, some mission that I must go carry out. I must create my own purpose, my own mission. And I've chosen to do so, to populate my life with the people I care about, to try to help other people whenever I can, to try to make as many friends as I can, to try to laugh as often as possible, to just suck the marrow out of every moment of this life. I mean, that's my solution. The temporary nature of this life is what makes it precious. If it went on forever and ever and ever, I mean, think about the Christian idea of eternity, which is the Christian heaven, where you go and essentially kiss God's ass forever, right? You're up there singing, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come, bada blah, bada blah, bada blah. I'm sorry, can I go to hell, please? You know, the temporary nature of this life is what makes it important for us to make sure that, and this sounds like a cliche, but that we don't let the sun go down without trying to make it right. You know, say the words you got to say. And do I want to die? No. I think my bigger fear is that something will incapacitate me and I will be useless for years before my death. That is a genuine fear. I don't dwell on it. But more than death, uselessness frightens me. You know, I see these tremendously sad cases of those who are physically unable to do any of the things they used to do, any of the things they used to enjoy. And they essentially are never going to get any better than they are, and they are breathing. Many times they're on life support. They're often alone. Their families are off living their lives, doing their things. And they just lie in bed and wait for the end, which could be weeks, months, or years away. That is terrifying. So I'm always, Natalie and I'm always like, we got to do better. We got to take better care of ourselves. We got to be healthier so that whenever we're 65 and 70, we can do stuff. We'll be better, you know, and I really do think it's a cause and effect thing. You know, we've got to be good stewards of our bodies now and, you know, hope that nothing horrible happens, you know, if some freak accident happens. But if you sat around all day and worried about what might happen, you'd go insane. A worrier's life is a prison. And it really hurts my heart, the idea that there are people who have a difficult time doing the everyday things that so many of us get to enjoy because they're always worried about the worst case scenario. Look, shit happens, man. This is a crazy world. I was looking at a horrible story just today. We had for us, a big snowstorm. We had 5 inches. But we had snow, we had ice, and of course the entire city is blanketed. And, you know, you're seeing people sliding around, you're seeing the fender benders, and you go, whatever. And then you read the news. And there was a story today. Apparently, many of these kids who are not used to any kind of wintry weather, young children, are seeing this glaze of ice on the ponds and the creeks and the lakes. And they think it's safe. Oh, look, won't it be fun to walk on the ice or to skate on the ice or whatever? And you just can't do that here. They found a 15-year-old girl's body, I think, just this morning. There's a little boy missing, you know. Geez, this tragedy is all around us. I had a friend I used to work with at Clear Channel. Her name is Barb. She was in the sales department just a few months back. She's probably 50. Driving on the highway. She's on the turnpike, driving who knows where. In a single car accident. Nobody even knows what happened. Funeral service. A few days later. You know, that stuff will happen. If we dwell on what might happen, we'll go crazy. And think of all the time we'd waste. All the time we could be living. All the time we could be making memories, you know. So that's the tack I normally take about it. And I think some of us do hit that sort of moment of crisis where you really start to dwell on it. And I have a feeling it'll pass. I hope for you it does. But was it Richard Dawkins who said, the ones who die are the lucky ones? Is that the one who said it? The ones who die are the lucky ones because it means they were given the chance to be alive in the first place. I'm totally paraphrasing. You know, the ones who never die, well, those are the ones who are never given a chance to draw breath and experience this life to begin with. I mean, we're the lucky ones. We got a shot against all the odds. We got a shot. We should make the most of it. Let's go to the phones quickly and see what you have to say. Area code 520. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Hannah. I just wanted to talk about, I wanted to ask you a question first thing. If you had to testify in court and they asked you to swear on the Bible, what would you say?
Well, you know, it's like, who was the politician who, instead of swearing on the Bible, swore his oath on the Constitution? I think I would try to find, I think there are avenues for the non-believer if you don't want to. I mean, who would want to swear on a book of falsehoods anyway? What kind of an oath is that?
Yeah.
What would you do?
Well, I would probably swear on the book Cosmos because it's such a great book.
Pardon me, Your Honor, do you have any Carl Sagan or Stephen Hawking back in your chamber that we could bring out? And I'll just put my hand on it and swear on that, sir. Would that be all right?
I actually found this quote one time of this guy who refused to swear on the Bible, and he said something along the lines of, I'm not going to swear on, what did he say? Oh, I can't remember, but he's like this super cool, I guess he's kind of famous. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he was talking about how he thought it was total crap and that he wasn't going to swear on it.
I looked it up while you were speaking awesome. Very quick. I was listening to you, but at the same time, I was also looking at Austin Klein has a great column on about.com on a variety of subjects dealing with atheism and secularism and science and rationalism. And he says this in the article, that you can affirm rather than swear. Court scenes in American movies, television, and books typically show people swearing an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Usually they swear an oath to God and with a hand on the Bible. Such scenes are so common that most people seem to assume it's required, but it's not. You have a right to just, quote, affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. No gods, Bibles, or anything else religious need to be involved. So there's the answer to your question, Hannah.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you.
All right.
It also says in the article, and now I'm curious, there are good political and ideological reasons for affirming an oath rather than swearing. Expecting people in court to swear an oath to God while using a Bible only helps reinforce Christian supremacy in America. It's not just a, quote, privilege for Christians that courts incorporate Christian beliefs and text into legal procedures, but instead a form of supremacy because they are receiving official state approval and citizens are expected to actively participate. That's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't do the Bible. I mean, who would want to swear? Those of us who have objectively looked at what's in those pages, who would want to place their reputation upon it? I think not. Had an email from Anonymous. It said this: I'm having trouble with my family. Last month, my parents found out I'm an atheist by looking at my YouTube account and my recent activity. I've been an atheist since the middle of last summer. They keep forcing me to go to church, even though I'm 19 years old. I can't move out because I don't have a driver's license and a job yet. Sometimes I can't deal with church because it sometimes scares me to the fact that I might be wrong and end up in hell. God, I hate the power of childhood indoctrination. It's hard for me to get rid of this superstition. I'd appreciate if you'd give me some advice. Well, again, I'm not a pro, but I came from your situation. I was essentially raised around Jesus. It was in Jesus Town that I was raised. As far as your mom and dad, I mean, normally their house, their rules, but you're a legal adult. Part of me's like, can they really force you to go? Under what consequences? They're going to kick you out on the street? They're going to take away the roof over your head and not allow you a chair at the dinner table? I don't understand really what sort of blackmail is underway here. You know, if you're 19 years old, in my opinion, you should be able to say, look, I choose not to attend for personal reasons. You know, I'm old enough to determine my own worldview. But it may be a chess game with you. I mean, if you've got somebody who's threatening to alter the trajectory of your life, you may have to make it more of a chess game until you can find your own exit. And I encourage you to do so as soon as you can. As soon as you can, productively. Good decisions, not rash ones. But there will come a day when you get to determine the tempo of your own house. And I hope that day for you comes very, very soon. I had an email in from Chris, who said, I thought an interesting subject for discussion on your mail call show would be the subject of modern moderate Christianity and what I loosely call the Great Compromise, which is what I call the cognitive dissonance, which allows moderate religious people to simultaneously, if loosely, believe that their religion is true and leads to rewards in the afterlife, and also believe that their friends, family, and neighbors who believe differently are also good people who are not in any imminent and real danger of eternal torture and damnation. Some atheists point out this discrepancy is a way of demonstrating that the faith of moderates is built on a very weak foundation. While that may be true to an extent, consider the alternative. While the day may come where the ratio of non-believers and the religious may switch, for now we have to accept the fact that we live in a very diverse society where the considerable majority of people are religious. If religious people didn't hold the contradictory opinion that their religion is true, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with people who believe differently, we'd be in a perpetual state of holy war. Can you imagine what life would be like if every self-identifying Christian truly believed that everybody they know who didn't subscribe to their brand of Christianity was doomed to eternal hellfire? With the same certainty that an infant crawling in the street will get run over by a car if they aren't helped immediately. It would be the Dark Ages all over again. To me, this compromise in thinking is an essential stage of transition for those who are not ready to let go of their faith. The more this way of thinking is seen as the norm among religious people, the more accepting they'll be to the secular community as we become more and more visible in the community. I say this because I believe many politically active atheists lose sight of the long game when they become cavalierly hostile to the religious community, perhaps thinking if they show people how stupid their beliefs are, quote unquote, they'll eventually come to our side. Or perhaps they think that just because the law is or should be on our side when it comes to small church-state separation violations, then we should litigate, regardless of how it comes across to the community it affects. The truth is, as it was with the gay community, stage one of any reform effort is to gain the public's trust and acceptance. The domino effect of states recognizing gay rights would have never happened were it not for a decades-long public relations effort on behalf of LGBT that made the rest of us sympathetic to their plight. If people feel threatened by us, or if they feel we hold them in arrogant disdain, then what hope do we have of making atheist not a derogatory term? Blowhards like Sarah Palin are looking to capitalize on the caricature of the angry atheist. The best thing we can do at this stage is lead by example to make claims like hers seem ridiculous, discriminatory, and mean-spirited. Once we have the sympathy of the public, not only will moderates feel less pressure to cling to a faith that they no longer really believe in, but it'll open the door to making secular reforms like demoting "In God We Trust" from our national motto and other such things. To attempt to put that cart before a horse that still doesn't view us favorably is folly. Chris, thank you very much for the letter. This one's a can of worms, isn't it? I myself find myself taking it case by case. In principle, suing a fire station for a nativity set on the lawn, on paper, I'm in the right. Right? Somebody puts a little baby Jesus in front of a tiny courthouse lawn somewhere in small town America. Well, by the letter of the law, I am correct. But is it worth it? Are there other battles we should be fighting? Do we look like total douchebags? We're going to be painted as the enemy, the devil, the worst of the worst, as monsters, no matter what we do. I get that. And we can't make all of our decisions based on what other people think we are, or say we are, or charge that we are, or warn their Christian children that we are. Sometimes right is right. Sometimes you do have to do the unpopular battles. I myself watch David Silverman and the folks at American Atheist and many of the things that they're doing. Many of them very unpopular battles. Many of them, in my opinion, necessary battles. There are some that I personally probably wouldn't do. You know, if I'm driving along and there's a public building funded by taxpayer dollars and they put a little baby Jesus in the front lawn, am I going to raise hell over that? Personally, no. Am I taking a magic marker and scratching "In God We Trust" out on every dollar bill I see? No. Do I think it should happen? Yeah. But we've got religion taking our political system by the throat. The theocrats are insane out there. Do I want to direct my energy to trying to get a few words off the money? Yeah. Eventually, yeah. Right now, for my part, no. I think I line up more with C.J. Werleman on this particular issue. Some of the times when we go out and we do a poor job of choosing our battles. And then there are other times when you need to go out and you just got to do it. You know, it's like I mentioned American Atheist doing the lawsuit to hold churches accountable, not to tax the churches, but to hold them financially accountable as 501c3s, where all the other 501c3s have to be hugely transparent with all their paperwork. The churches are treated with a completely different set of rules. Well, that's a worthy suit. Think of all the money that's being funneled here and there, and no one can really track or trace it. Let all the 501c3s be treated by the same standard. That's an absolutely, in my opinion, an absolutely worthy lawsuit. Popular? No. Will they be vilified? Yeah. So what? Somebody says, God bless you when I sneeze. Do I stop them and rip them a new one? Because I don't believe in that. No. What an unbelievably unpleasant person would I be if I did that? God bless you or bless you. I don't believe in this nonsense, you brainwashed sheep. No, I say thanks. Appreciate it. See you later. You can do a lot more harm hitting the brakes and turning yourself into a ranting maniac at that moment. Geez, we do a terrible job in many cases of choosing our battles. I think Chris is absolutely right on many points. And often some of the best stuff we can do is to just live a loud, proud, productive, happy, well-rounded, fulfilled, secular life in full view of those around us. I mean, you know, we are in full view of those around us. People are told inside the church that the atheist can extract no real happiness from this life, and they have no moral compass, and they have no reason to live, and they can't truly experience love and joy. And the idea that, first of all, it's absolutely bogus and ridiculous. But to be able to live your own life loud and proud. No, you know what? I'm an atheist. I don't believe in church or God. I used to be religious, but I'm not anymore. Hey, you know what? Let's go out and have a beer. Hey, there's a great movie on this weekend. You want to go? It's going to be great. Hey, did you see that thing on TV the other day? Hey, I read a great book. It was hysterical. Have you read it? You know, just to live your life. People know that you're an atheist. They see a life that is wonderful without the idea of religion. And, you know, they'll come to a point when they may have a question and they approach you. Look, I don't know anything about atheism, okay? But you're an atheist. I just thought I'd ask. Can I ask you something? You're not going to pound rationality into most of these people. You're just not. We can have the discussions, but I think we also need to make sure we choose our battles. Area code 516. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Oh, hi. My name is David.
Thanks for calling the show, David. What do you have for us tonight?
I was wondering, I don't know if you've done a show on this, but I used to think that atheists generally were more intelligent than theists. In fact, there had even been studies that I'd seen that showed a correlation between non-belief and a higher IQ. Now, using your show, as well as some research and keeping an open mind, I've managed to kind of throw that out the window, and I don't really think that atheists are automatically more intelligent than theists. There's way more theists than atheists, so how can you just make a general statement like that? Even if the ratio, like atheists have a higher IQ in terms of studies, I don't know if you can say anything remotely similar for theists because there's just so many more. You know, it's too general of a statement. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that was.
Wasn't there an article that came out in, August of this year that said, it actually said it outright. It said religious people are less intelligent than non-believers. And of course, you know, we're all walking softly around this one. It was over at University of Rochester. They found a negative relation between intelligence and religiosity in 53 out of 63 studies. Even in extreme old age, intelligent people are less likely to believe, the researchers found. And the reasons why people with high IQs shun religion may not be as simple as previously thought. And the article goes on. I myself shy away from, is the atheist more intelligent? I honestly think we're not really talking primarily about an intelligence or lack of it. I think we're talking about the power of indoctrination. We're talking about education, talking about culture. There's so many factors that play into why people are religious. And I think it's very lazy for us to just go out and play the superiority card. You know, the atheist, the non-believer's more intelligent, and the statistics show it. Well, that's, even if it might be correct on fact, let's say they come to a point where they say, you know, in most of the studies, yes, people who are non-religious are actually higher in IQ. That's not the card I want to play out there. And I know a lot of people who are religious who are wicked smart. I mean, they're brilliant business people. They're genuinely razor sharp. And it is because they treat their religion with a different set of rules, quite often because they were raised in a religious family and have just given deference to that religion. You know, they have a desire to believe. The brain being very modular, they simply put the religion thing over here and give it a pass, and everything else gets treated critically. I feel that we're looking at people who have been trained not to engage the brain, but rather the heart in terms of religion. And so I think even if it turned out that there was a higher intelligence factor for the non-believer, I'm not sure how that really helps us out there, other than making some people in the YouTube comment section feeling more superior about themselves. You know? Exactly.
I mean, I'm not trying to say that that's the only part of it. I'm just saying that's a factor. You know, that in fact, it shames me to admit that I had a prejudice against religious people. If I didn't know someone was religious, if I knew actually rather that someone was religious when I met them, I had automatically thought, oh, I do not respect your opinion as much, and it was terrible. I mean, thankfully, reading your book and just discovering things, it's indoctrination. It's all this. You know, you convince some really smart people to believe in some really illogical stuff, and that's really upsetting. And you know, the statement that all atheists are smarter, it's ridiculous. Just there's so many factors.
In many ways, it's lazy, right? We're patting ourselves on the back. Wow, aren't we enlightened and smarter than the rest of the room? Well, come on. I mean, is that really the angle you would want to take? Even if it was true, I don't think so. Thank you very much for the call. I do appreciate it, okay?
Thank you.
All right. It's funny, I was giving a presentation in several cities over the fall, and we were talking about how reason is distrusted. It's not that they don't have the power to reason, the believer, but because they are often brainwashed to believe that, well, the mind will trick you, right? The brain, that's the devil's playground. God belongs in the heart. You'll test drive 15 vehicles, 6 different car lots over the course of 3 months before you sign the note on a car. Before you send your child off to college, you vet every single university in a 4-state area. Visit many of them, interview the staff, and take the tour, and look on the internet to see if they've earned their good reputation. Before they buy a home, they search all around and they buy the home buyer's guide, and they do estimates. They do all this stuff. I mean, they're hugely analytical about all these areas of their life. Hell, before they buy some clothes, they'll go try it on, look at themselves in the mirror 10 times, ask somebody else, what do you think? And let's try on 10 other things. But religion is none of that. It's a completely different set of rules. Somebody just test drove 15 cars before they purchased one. But they absolutely know the Holy Bible is true without even knowing who authored the book of Genesis. And they don't care to know. It's a different mechanism in place. It's about comfort. It's about the familiar. It's about alleviating the fear of hell. It's about quite often the scientific community, because these people have been indoctrinated to do so. Carl Sagan, he's an agent of Satan. Bill Nye the science guy is really Bill Nye the humanist guy, according to Ken Ham of the Creation Museum. I'm not convinced it's really about intelligence. I think it's about some other deeper stuff. Alexander sent a message and said, I've been an atheist since the month of August. I'm a pastor's daughter, married to a pastor's son. And we deconverted a few months after our daughter was born. Wow. I'd been dormant in the faith for years, but having a baby made me really re-examine my faith to know what to teach her. Welcome to This World, my video. Welcome to This World was a real eye-opening video for me. Your book was the second atheist book I ever read after The God Delusion. And your coming out podcast archives gave me the courage to come out to my family. It's still really rough for all of us, but your show really helps. Thank you so much. You married a pastor's son and you both came out? You know, it's a different situation for different people, but my heart just goes out to you. And I'm not sure exactly how they are responding or are going to respond. But let me encourage you, Alexandra. They are probably genuinely concerned about your immortal soul, and they want to see you in heaven. They're operating from a point of sincere belief that they need to help you. But also know that as an adult, you have earned the right to live your own life and not somebody else's life. Matt Dillahunty said in the podcast we did last week, the burden of proof is on them. Extraordinary claims do require extraordinary evidence, and you finally came to a point in your life and you said, look, I'm not going to go there unless the evidence supports it. And the evidence just doesn't support this, and I want to live a truthful life. Good for you. Fantastic for you. I'm excited for your child. Free-thinking parents in love with science, not restrained by generations of religious thinking or non-thinking. You guys get to discover the world together. How awesome is that going to be? You probably have to keep an eye on Grandpa and Grandma, right? The child goes over there, it'll be like, oh, we're taking him to church. Got to rescue the grandchild. You know, I've heard a lot of those types of stories. Now, let your kid go to church as long as you're there to make sure that they're not targeted. Yeah. Let them experience what the religion is about. Hey, this is the religion of your Mima and Papa, or Grandpa and Grandma, whatever your tradition calls. You know, your dad and I don't believe in this way. But, you know, you're going to have to determine really what you think about all this. You know, here's the Christian religion that Mom and Dad practice. And you know what? Here's Islam over here. And here's what they believe. And here's some Eastern religions over here. Here's this. Here's that. Here's Scientology. Here's the Mormon faith. Here's Jehovah's Witnesses. Check them all out. Tell me what you think. Your kid gets to look objectively at this stuff instead of starting with the answer. It's to ask the question first. And you're going to be a part of that. And I think that's worth doing. It's worth coming out to your parents for. It's worth defining your own life in your own way for. And I'm genuinely thankful for you. And despite the challenges that are coming, just know that you are not alone. There's a huge community of people here who do have your back. I promise. Had an email from someone who preferred to remain anonymous, said, as a recovering evangelical, I've let go of the dogma and the belief in the supernatural, but I'm having a hard time imagining giving up all aspects of church, some of which I still find valuable. I wonder how other former believers have wrestled through these issues. For example, the church prays for one another's needs. Now I've ceased to believe that there's any deity listening to those prayers and changing his divine will accordingly, but I believe that what's actually happening in communal prayer is that the person being prayed for feels supported by a community of people who've taken intentional time to listen to their needs. It's a very human-to-human interaction, and that human-to-human support is just as real and just as valuable whether or not a God exists. Without the context of a weekly church meeting, where else in life do we have the forum to share joys and concerns in that way? In theory, atheists could gather and intentionally set aside time to share their problems and support one another without God, but I just don't see any forum for that to happen in day-to-day life. This is one thing the church does well. When I'm feeling down or lonely, I still feel tempted to return to the church for support or community. There are certainly aspects of religion that are harmful, and I certainly don't ignore that fact, but I find there are other aspects of it that are beautiful and valuable, and I have a hard time walking away entirely. The question is directed to former believers who really loved church at one time, but found they could not believe the dogma anymore. How did you wrestle with giving up the aspects of faith that you did find valuable at one time? Well, one of the reasons that I founded the Thinking Atheist online community was to sort of create a community when I felt isolated, and the internet has been a solution for a great many people. It doesn't really solve the day-to-day meeting people, rubbing elbows with other people, and that's where local free thought groups are coming in handy. They're springing up all over the country. And Google free thought group or even atheist group in your town, secular group, meetup group in your town. Pretty good chance there'll be something, if not within your zip code, at least within your general region. Community is not the domain of the church. They don't have a monopoly on getting together and supporting each other. And you're right about, they would come together and we would pray for someone who had a need. I actually spoke with Dr. Andy Thompson in a show we did called Religion and the Placebo Effect that talked about the actual physical changes that happen by all these environmental things and the laying on of hands and the music and the trust between one person and another, the kind words of support. They're physical changes that happen in your body. Explainable changes, explainable by science. There's not a divine spirit in there working his magic now that you said the magic password. But religion doesn't have a monopoly on that. The atheist meetups and the atheist assemblies, the media calls them atheist churches or mega churches, which drives me crazy. They're a solution for a lot of people. Don says, I'm a little older, 60, and I have friends who have various health issues. I want to express my care and concern for them, but I lack a proper phrase. I always end up saying, I'm sending you good vibrations. Now, I know I'm not actually doing this, but I don't really have something good to say. Do you have any suggestions? Well, what I always do is I try to genuinely mean it, before I say it. But if there's anything I can do for you, and I know it's cliche, and I know most people will never take you up on it. But if there's anything I can do, can we run by a restaurant and bring you guys some dinner tomorrow night? I know you're going through a lot. You're in my thoughts today, and hey, man, if you need to talk, here's my number. I think you respond to a tangible with a tangible. And there's nothing like a human voice, a human touch, a human word of encouragement, a helping hand. When people pray, when they're in the hospital rooms and their loved ones are in the hospital bed being cared for around the clock by humans, and they're being given medication invented by human scientists, and their own body's healing mechanism is essentially at work, and all of these natural things are part of their solution, and they look up and they thank God or pray, I'll pray for you. Well, that's not even satisfying. But to say, look, let me come up and sit with you for an hour. Let me run down the hall and grab you something. Want me to flip the TV on for you? There's a great show on tonight. Those small things are not really small things. Just you being in the room, just you making a phone call, you writing a letter, you doing something that just reminds somebody, look, I care. It matters to me. I think that's huge. Don't sell yourself short. You want to send them some good vibrations, man, go ahead. It doesn't mean you're sending them like spiritual vibrations. It just means I'm on your side. I'm rooting for you. I think that's awesome. I think they're lucky to have you as a friend. Anthony said, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the show and how much it's come to mean to me. About 2 years ago, at a whopping 270 pounds, I decided to do something about my weight. I bought a bicycle and began cycling. Around the same time, I also found your podcast. As my speed and distance increased and my health got better, I found I needed something to listen to on those long 20, 50, 75, and finally 100-mile rides. The Thinking Atheist podcast. You're kidding. The Thinking Atheist podcast over the last nearly 10,000 miles has been the absolute best companion. Having lost 70 pounds, I committed to riding my bicycle across the United States in May of 2014. You would be coming along, riding shotgun in my headphones as I pedaled the miles across our great country. Wow. Anthony continues, sadly, about 2 months ago, I wasn't feeling quite right and went to the doctor. After a diagnosis of colon cancer, enlarged tumor, etc., life has taken a difficult turn. However, a month ago, I had the surgery, removing a couple feet of colon, the tumor, and the affected lymph nodes. And last week, I started chemotherapy. The cross-country tour is off, at least for now, as I go through the pain in the ass that only chemo can be. It's long hours in a chair, hooked up to an IV. But time passes okay because I still listen to the Thinking Atheist podcast. Well, I'm getting all drugged up. You and your guests, the show, the caliber of content, and brilliant presentation all serve to keep me focused on my health, my family, and my obligations as a man and as an atheist. I'm sure I will survive. And have already been back on the bicycle, but have only managed a 20-miler. I place my trust in the amazing scientists and doctors that are my healthcare team. Thank you, Seth, for the Thinking Atheist podcast. Rest assured, I'll be listening in. Anthony, I'm sending you good vibrations, man. I am just stunned by your letter. Thank you so much for that. And congratulations on the weight loss and all my best in beating this thing, getting back to 100%. And 20 miles on a bike is a hell of a lot more than I've done. Really, really something. Thank you for sharing your story and for sharing your letter. One more phone call, and then I'm going to finish with an email. Area code 314. You're on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast. Who's this?
Yeah, this is Terrence.
Thanks for calling, Terrence. What do you have for us tonight?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. What did you, while you're a Christian, right? What did you think about atheists, though? Like, what was your take on atheism as a whole?
I didn't think about atheists. I mean, I just didn't. Yeah, I was raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? I've got Rhema Bible Training Center just down the road. I've got Oral Roberts University about 15 minutes from here. Even Tulsa University, privately owned, I believe, is owned by a religious organization, I think. There are churches everywhere. I could throw a rock out my front window right now and hit a church. It's the kind of culture where everybody said, God bless you, Jesus bless you. Atheists were not even on my radar. I just did. And if the word atheism came up, I blinked it away. I honestly probably subscribed to the caricature of the atheist, somebody who was this constant frown walking around, making the world worse every single day and destined for hell. But those thoughts were few and far between. Largely, I just thought everybody around here believed in Jesus.
That's strange for me because the only thing I knew about atheists is that they just didn't believe in God. That was it while I was a Christian. I never heard anything about them not having morals or being sad or having no purpose in life. I never really heard any of that while I was a Christian.
Oh, I hear it all the time. You should see my email inbox. How do you know rape is wrong if you don't believe in Jesus Christ? That kind of thing. I hear it all the time. What kind of life can you possibly have if you know that you're one day going to die and that'll be it and there won't be any heaven? I hear those types of things all the time. You're missing out on the true joys of this world. And so those people are definitely out there and they are loud and proud for sure.
I never heard anything like that. I was like...
Well, look, some of that is a top-down environment. What happens is, if you make the non-believer toxic, then you have better insulated your flock so that they won't be out there testing the world. They won't be out there testing their belief system. They don't even want to talk about it. If you've created this monster out there. Did you ever see the film The Village? They had those we don't speak of. These creatures that lived off here, and you only lived inside these narrow boundaries, and you never ventured out, and you certainly never went over the wall to go explore anywhere. Everybody just stay here and churn the butter and be happy and shut up. That's exactly what church does. And they say out there is danger. These people are poison. They will infect you. They will disease you. And that's their way of essentially keeping you close. It's a method of control. And in the age of the internet, it is becoming more and more difficult for religious organizations and even religious cultures and families to play the fear card, to play the monster in the closet card. Okay, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Now, if somebody's curious, the internet allows them to go and discover more. They can still be anonymous. They can still sort of be in the shadows, but they can vicariously sort of participate through the internet and be a part of the discussion. And behold, the doors begin to open. My final email tonight is by a young lady named Shauna. And Shauna says this: Hi, I strongly felt the need to email and say, I totally understand the confusion reading the Bible can sometimes produce, and have often prayed to God and said, why not just write it where everyone can understand it? God actually answered back and increased my understanding of the Bible 2 years ago when I finally dedicated my life to Jesus after an insane, crazy life. Before then, I was just as confused as the next guy on what to believe in this life. I'd searched spirituality for years on what truth is and why there's so many religions, and how do you know who's right? And if you were raised reading the Quran, that would be what was right. And if you were raised reading the Torah, that would be right, and so on and so on. Then factor in the Bible. Super confusing at times, and it's all just too much. I finally decided one day just to say out loud, look, whoever's up there, I just want to be right with you, okay? Please, clearly we don't live in Greek mythological times. Greek mythological times? Actually, the Greeks did exist, John, where we have no gods. So will the real God please just make yourself known? That is exactly, all caps, what he, God, Jesus, did. I realize this site is based on atheism, belief there is no God, but I gotta laugh, not at you, but with you. This isn't hostile, because I literally, all caps, speak and hear God's voice daily, and I pray, quote, directly to him, that people who don't believe will realize, all caps, he is real. He says he loves everyone despite their belief, and all you got to do is ask him to reveal himself through Jesus Christ, and he will come to you. Please understand there is only one true God, and he is known in three parts: God the Father, God the Son, Jesus, God the Holy Spirit. God is also amazing. I can't describe what being in his presence is like other than complete and total happiness. There are many things in life that don't make sense. And sure, I have tons of questions about the Bible, but who doesn't? What I've learned to do, instead of instantly saying, seriously, there's no way this is even remotely real, I ask God to just give me clarity on what he's saying, and he does. The Bible is a spiritual experience you are to share with God. It is intimate and actually truly does possess meaning. I totally respect each person's right to believe what they want, but now that I know the truth, and I seriously mean Jesus is real, hell is real, I can only ask you take me at my word here, or contact me and I will share my life experience with you on how I know for 100% fact Jesus is real, and all caps, so is hell. I have to beg people who still don't believe to please, please, please try again. Just look up and say, okay, whoever you are, I just want to be right with you. What will it hurt to do this? No one has to know you're saying this. Heck, if I'm wrong, I'm not, by the way. What have you lost? But if I'm right, your life will be saved. I hope whoever reads this will just take a couple seconds to give Jesus a real chance. You won't be sorry. Shauna. Well, Shauna, how do you know I didn't give Jesus a real chance in my own life? I wish I could take you back in time as I walked the aisle at Eastwood Baptist Church at the age of 9 at a revival service and fervently welcomed Jesus into my heart. Please, Jesus, forgive me of all my sins. Make me pure and whole again. Be my Savior. Come into my heart and be Lord of my life. Believed it with all my heart. I wish I could show you that day. Because I gave Jesus a real chance. I gave Jesus a real chance when I was on stage as a spokesperson for Youth for Christ, trying to tell people 3 times my age what life was all about. When I was surrounding myself with Christian music, making it the soundtrack of my life, I was a Christian broadcaster, believing I was doing God's good work, promoting God's good message, and a godly alternative to what the world offered out there. I thought I knew my Bible. I thought I knew the story of Jesus. And I was like you. I felt like I had the answer. I'm absolutely right on this. Heck, if I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. Some of the phrasing in your letter does give me pause. If you get a second, Google something called Pascal's wager, because you essentially did it. Right? If I'm wrong, what have you lost? If I'm right, your life will be saved. Well, that's not true conviction. That's fire insurance. It's not true belief or love for a deity or faith. It's, man, I sure don't want to burn. So you know what? I'm going to bluff a little bit on this poker hand. What you've essentially said is, I don't really necessarily 100% believe, and I don't think this omniscient deity will notice. Well, if you're just sort of buying a ticket to heaven, just in case, right? You're just in it for a seat on the train. An omnipotent deity will know this, and that's not true belief. Your problems with the Bible? Well, that's not a lack of faith. It means you are, at least in one sense, mildly observant. Because the Bible is rife with problems. And think about the equivocation that you just did, excusing God's holy book, his number one method of instruction for humankind. I know some of it doesn't really make sense. I know, sometimes I look at God and go, what? What are you talking? This is crazy talk. And then I just ask him. And he pats me on the head and tells me it's going to be all right. You know, if 2/3 of the planet don't worship him, how effective has your all-loving God been in getting the word out? I can send an email perfectly communicating any message I desire to communicate all the way around the world in about 3 seconds, right? Well, not including the typing of the letter. I, a mere mortal, a mere human, a mere insect under the foot of God, am actually a better communicator. I'm not throwing batshit parables out the window, hoping that people go, hey, look at that. Wonder what that means. I'm not writing contradictory messages, because the Bible is very contradictory. I'm not hiding the message. You know what? I've got this very important, critical, life-altering message. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to type it up in letter form, and then instead of hand-delivering it to the recipient, I think what I'll do is I think I'll hide it under the back seat cushion of their car. And you know what? One of these days, when they're cleaning the car, they're over there at the car wash, and they got the vacuum out, you know, and they're cleaning under the seats. And look, they're going to find it. And there's going to be and they're going to open it up, and they're going to see it. I mean, come on, that's exactly what God has done with the Bible. We don't even have the original manuscripts of God's word. We don't know who authored God's word. Right? It was human beings who actually voted or created the mechanism for the canonization of Scripture, the collection of the books. Well, that's crazy. Why would you ever have to vote on what is essentially God's authoritative word? There were different canons, in fact, of Scripture. Oh, well, this book was never canonized over here. Well, why not? Some subjective, flawed human decided so. Why is your holy book more worthy than another holy book out there? Lots of holy books. And you know, if you hear God's voice and you tell me because of your personal experience, you know, well, that's what we call anecdotal evidence, Shauna. And if I'm going to accept your anecdotal evidence, your personal eyewitness testimony, I'm going to say, okay, this is enough for me. If somebody is this convinced, it is now evidence. It is now proof to me. I will accept it as proof. If I'm going to do that with you, there's a guy right over there who's saying the very same thing about Allah. He's just as convinced as you are. And you know, he didn't always understand what was in the Quran. And he said to Allah, I said, please help me understand this. And he did. And I hear his voice and I talk to him daily. I just know he's real. If you'll just give him a chance. He believes that just as much as you do. Now, if he does, and he comes to me with the same story, and anecdotal evidence is worthy evidence, well, who do I get to listen to? Right? You can't say that your personal, subjective personal experience has to be accepted, and I have to reject his. He's just as convinced as you are. Hey, wait a minute, there's a person over here who believes that they commune with their spirit animal. You know what? I hear the voice of the owl. It gives me wisdom and intuition to avoid danger and calamity in this world. I hear his voice in my head, and I dream of the owl, and I know it's real. No one could ever tell me it wasn't real. This person's they're just as convinced as you are. Well, if I'm going to take your word at face value, then I have to take this person's word at face value as well. And his word contradicts your word, which contradicts their word, which contradicts their word. This is the reason that eyewitness testimony is so unreliable in court cases. I often bring up the work of Levin and Kramer. They did a work called Problems and Materials on Trial Advocacy. And they said this: eyewitness testimony is at best evidence of what the witness believes to have occurred. It may or may not tell what actually happened. The familiar problems of perception, of gauging time, speed, height, weight, of accurate identification of persons accused of crime, all contribute to making honest testimony something less than completely credible. What they're saying is that perception and reality aren't necessarily the same. The scientist out there has put together something called the God helmet. His name is Michael Persinger. And they use electromagnets to stimulate the brain. And in some people have been able to recreate an absolutely convincing feeling that there is a divine presence in the room. Now, that's not God. There's a reason you may be thinking you hear or feel something, but it ain't necessarily God. And honestly, with heaven and hell in the balance, wouldn't you think that a loving, just, benevolent deity would give us a little more to go on? Right? He's playing the game of telephone. Somebody tells somebody, and then they tell somebody else, and then they whispered in somebody else's ear, and then they go here and tell somebody else, and they do this. And 5,000 people later, you can't even understand what the original message was. Hey, what did that first guy actually say? That's benevolence? Remember, I can send a message all the way around the world completely, clearly, immediately. Yahweh decides he's going to have a bunch of anonymous goat herders author a document hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before the invention of the printing press. In a time when most people were illiterate and had to have things read to them. They couldn't even read it themselves. Be honest with yourself. about Jesus. And come on, Shauna, do you really think, I mean, when you're being honest with you, do you really think that there's a magic being out there, a creature, a god, a father, who created hundreds and hundreds of billions of galaxies just so that you could be the center of the universe? All right? You were the most important thing in his life, so important that he killed part of himself for you. He sent his own son, part of the Trinity that you just described for us, to earth to have him horribly tortured and executed on our behalf. Now that's love. So what's the rest of the universe for? And while we're talking about hell, who created that to begin with? Well, that was God, wasn't it? Yahweh. That's his idea. He put it together. When I die as a non-believer and go to hell, how do I get there? Yahweh hand places me there. Well, he doesn't put you there. You choose. No. Look, if you offer me a choice between spending the rest of my life in chains or walking into a fiery furnace, you haven't given me a choice. It's a non-choice disguised as free will. God could have vaporized us at the end of our lives. He could have tortured us temporarily. Why is hell eternal? Why not seconds? Why not minutes? Even an hour? Writhing in the most unimaginable agony for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and then it's over. Lesson learned. Really sorry, God. And then I don't get to spend eternity with him. I'm annihilated. Why torture me forever? If you'd read about an earthly tyrant throwing young children into a pit full of fire and watching them writhe and scream in pain, wouldn't you be offended by that? Wouldn't you be absolutely horrified? Your own moral compass would be just spinning. You would absolutely feel that alarm clock going off inside you that said, this is abhorrent. Yahweh does it and he gets a pass. In fact, he gets your love. Really? Why, 2,000 years later, are we still having to have discussions about whether or not Jesus actually existed? And every time they have a debate on YouTube or have a conference, and they'll call it, Does God Exist? There was a conference in Australia that was called, Has Science Killed God? Well, wait a minute. If you have to ask the question, how effective has God been at answering the question to begin with? If you have to say, hey, you know what? Is God around here? Is he dead? If you have to even take a second to consider it, how effective has God been at making himself known to those he supposedly cares so much about? And you know, Jesus, he's a loving Jesus, right? You read the book of, is it in Romans, where he says, love one another as I've loved you, so must you love one another? Doing it from memory. Love, he's a lover of people. He says, love one another. He also said in Matthew, don't suppose that I've come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Jesus came and essentially said, choose me over them or else. Your Jesus has like multiple personalities, and he can turn on a dime. What kind of a deity would tell him to turn his back on his own children, his own spouse? Do you worship that? Does that give you joy? Does that give you comfort? Do you think that's moral? Ask yourself why Jesus looks so much like other previous deities from mythologies and religions that far predate Christianity. Ask yourself why we don't see divine miracles that can't be explained in other ways. There's a great website called Why God Won't Heal Amputees, right? We see people cured of the sniffles, or we see them. Where's the definitive miracle? Why doesn't God heal amputees? Where's the raising of the dead? Where's all the stuff we see in the Old and New Testament? Why did the miracles stop once the video camera was invented and proper tools to document it? Ask yourself, Shauna, why you distance yourself from the Bible and make it this sort of unprovable, nebulous, vague, kind of foggy personal experience. If you're going to claim Jesus, then you have to claim his book, don't you? The perfect God and his perfect word. And if you want a real good look at Scripture, I suggest you start at Genesis 1:1 and honestly and objectively start through the entire thing again. I've got a section on my own website. It's not nearly a comprehensive section, but it's a taste of some of the challenges with Scripture. The Skeptic's Annotated Bible is a great place to see Scripture through another lens. Just use your own compass. You know, you've earned the right to have a life of your own, haven't you? Think about how much better life would be if you weren't a slave to all this nonsense. If you weren't sending emails pleading to keep me out of a hell that your God created in the first place. Many times we were victims. We had this stuff pounded into us as children. You know what? Pastors treat their congregation like mushrooms. They feed us shit and they keep us in the dark. There's a much grander, better, more satisfying world out there. And if you can get over your fear of hell, your fear of getting it wrong, and gain the courage to ask questions and carve out a path of your own, I have a suspicion you will find the Jesus that you are selling me much, much less satisfying. Okay? I did not mean for that answer to go on and on, but it's something I'm passionate about. And you know, I used to talk a lot like Shauna. Oh, I don't want you to go to hell. My heart aches at the idea that you would miss heaven. You would miss all the joy in this life. Shauna, I didn't come to this position of non-belief in gods lightly. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to throw everything I used to hold dear under the bus. I'm going to turn my whole life upside down. Won't that be a gas? I didn't choose not to believe. I finally, at midlife, did the math, read the history, saw the science beyond my bubble, and a light bulb went off, and I saw a whole new world. And one day, I hope you see a whole new world as well. Thank you so much for listening to the show tonight. Next Tuesday night, my special guest will be theoretical physicist Professor Lawrence Krauss, and it's going to be a terrific show. I hope you can join us. And then the day after that is the best and worst of 2013. If you have a nomination, send your emails in to podcast@thethinkingatheist.com. I'll see you later.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.